Epsilon 12 orbital station hummed with the quiet efficiency of concordant technology, its sensors constantly sweeping the surface of planet XJ272 below. The station's xenobiology labs buzzed with activity as three researchers monitored their screens, tracking the movements of various species across the planet's hostile surface. Another Class 5 Apex signature, moving through Sector 7, announced Dr. Lexi Thorne, her fingers dancing across holographic displays that showed heat signatures and biorhythm readings. Vexorian Shadow Stalker by the look of these readings. Professor Enva Kolthak, a distinguished Altarian with silver-tinged scales, swiveled in his chair. Those creatures are remarkable predators. 23 confirmed kills of survey teams in the past cycle alone. What's the human doing down there anyway? Director Quul Mexis, whose 4 eyes could process data streams, simultaneously gestured toward another screen. Alexander Novak, former Terran combat medic. He requested permission to survey the Class 5 zone specifically, claimed he had new theories about apex predator behavior. Theories? Dr. Thorne laughed, though there was concern in her voice. The man's walking into a death trap with nothing but advanced medical equipment. Did you see his gear manifest nanosutures, cellular regenerators, combat stimulants? It's like he's planning to open a field hospital, not conduct predator research. The 3 xenobiologists had been tracking Novak's progress for 6 standard hours. He moved with the careful precision of someone who had seen combat, his biosuit's sensors feeding data back to their station. The medical pack he carried was extensive, beyond anything typically taken on survey missions. "Hold on," Director Quul's voice suddenly sharpened. "We've got multiple signatures converging on Sector 7. Plasma discharge detected." On their screens, energy readings spiked dramatically. Heat blooms appeared on the thermal imagery, and the Shadow Stalker's signature went erratic, then still. Scavenger pack fight," Professor Enva observed. "Looks like they caught the Shadow Stalker off guard with explosive charges. Plasma burns probably fatal." "And our human is—" Dr. Thorne traced Novak's signature on her screen. "Moving directly toward the wounded predator. Is he insane? Should we signal emergency extraction?" Director Quul's manipulator appendages hovered over the communication controls. "Let's watch," Professor Enva said quietly. "This could be educational." Alexander Novak crouched behind a crystalline outcropping, his suit's sensors painting a detailed picture of the scene ahead. The massive Shadow Stalker lay among the smoking remains of lesser scavengers, its midnight black carapace marred by burning wounds. Plasma had torn through its left flank, exposing biometallic muscle tissue beneath. The creature's breathing was labored, its natural camouflage flickering weakly as its systems struggled to maintain function. For a moment, Alexander simply watched. The creature was nearly 3 meters long with 6 limbs, ending in retractable talons designed for both climbing and killing. Its head was elongated, crowned with sensory organs that could detect movement from kilometers away. Even wounded, it was one of the most dangerous predators in known space. But Alexander had seen worse wounds on human soldiers, and those soldiers had lived. "Stupid, stupid," he muttered to himself, checking his medical supplies one more time. "But if I'm right—" He approached slowly, hands visible, medical scanner extended. The Shadow Stalker's head snapped toward him, its 4 primary eyes focusing with predatory intensity. The creature's chromatophores shifted warning colors, rippling across its hide. "Easy," Alexander spoke in a low, steady voice, though he knew the creature couldn't understand his words. "I'm here to help." The predator's response was to raise itself slightly, exposing fangs designed to pierce armored plating. A low, subsonic growl vibrated through the ground. Alexander stopped, set down his medical pack, and sat cross-legged in full view of the wounded creature. He began to remove items from his pack, deliberately narrating his actions in calm tones. Broad-spectrum anesthetic, cellular regenerator, synthetic protein matrices. He held up each item, letting the creature observe. "I've seen plasma burns before. On humans, Altarians, even a Zelthian once. Same principles apply. The shadow stalker watched its head tilting with obvious intelligence. Its breathing remained labored, and fluorescent blue fluid that served as its blood pooled beneath the wounds. Up on the station, the three xenobiologists watched in stunned silence as their instruments recorded everything. His stress indicators are elevated but stable. Dr. Thorne reported, her voice barely above a whisper. He's actually calm down there. The predator's neurochemistry is fascinating, Professor Enva added, manipulating his display to get better readings. Elevated aggression compounds, yes, but also curiosity, and something else I can't identify. Director Kuhl was already reaching for the emergency communications. I'm calling in the rapid response team. This is madness. Wait, Dr. Thorne caught his arm. Look at the predator's positioning. On screen, they could see the shadow stalker had lowered itself slightly, no longer in an immediate attack posture. Its camouflage had stabilized to a neutral pattern. Alexander had been talking steadily for 10 minutes, his medical scanner mapping the creature's injuries. Finally, he stood slowly and took a step forward. The predator tensed, but didn't strike. I'm going to use the anesthetic now, Alexander announced, raising a pressure injector. This might sting. He fired the device toward the predator's neck, where he'd identified a major nerve cluster. The shadow stalker jerked, then its posture relaxed as the anesthetic took effect. Phase 1 complete, Alexander murmured, moving closer with his cellular regenerator. Now for the hard part. The next 3 hours were a masterclass in xenological emergency medicine. Alexander worked methodically, using his regenerator to knit together torn muscle fibers, his nanosutures to close arterial damage, and synthetic matrices to replace destroyed tissue. The shadow stalker remained still under anesthesia, but its vital signs remained strong. On the station, the xenobiologists documented everything, their instruments recording not just the medical procedures, but the bizarre neurochemical responses from both human and predator. The human's mirror neuron activity is off the charts, Dr. Thorne observed. He's empathically connected to the creature's pain responses. And look at this, Professor Enva highlighted a data stream. The predator system is accepting the synthetic proteins without rejection. That should be impossible. Different species, different biochemistry. Not impossible, Director Kuhl corrected grimly. Just unprecedented. I've sent the signal. Rapid response team is airborne. As if on cue, the roar of approaching engines echoed from the speakers. On their screens, they could see 3 Phalanxian assault craft descending rapidly toward Alexander's position. Alexander heard them coming long before they arrived. He was applying the final synthetic matrix patches when the distinctive whine of Phalanxian military engines reached him. The shadow stalker, now conscious, but still groggy, raised its head at the sound. Company, Alexander said, softly, settling his hand gently on the predator's neck. To his surprise, the creature didn't recoil. If anything, it seemed to lean into the touch. The assault craft landed in a triangle formation around them, Marines pouring out with containment gear and heavy weapons. Their leader, a Phalanxian captain with cybernetic implants visible along his skull, advanced with a stun shield raised. Step away from the creature, human, the captain ordered through his suit's speakers. We're here to extract you safely. I'm fine where I am, Alexander replied, not moving his hand from the shadow stalker's neck. Medical treatment is complete. Patient is stable. Patient. The captain's translator couldn't quite handle the concept. That's a Class 5 apex predator, not a patient. Step away so we can contain it for proper study. The shadow stalker's chromatophores suddenly blazed with warning colors, its muscles tensing, despite the lingering effects of the anesthetic. It moved to position itself between Alexander and the Marines. I don't think it wants to be contained, Alexander observed calmly. What happened next would be studied in xenobiology texts for decades. As the Marines advanced with their containment equipment, the shadow stalker moved with surprising grace to shield Alexander from multiple angles. In return, Alexander positioned himself to cover the predator's injured flank. Neither human nor predator had planned this coordination. It simply happened like a dance they'd practiced 1,000 times. "Magnificent," breathed Professor Enva from the station. "They're moving in complete synchronization. The human is compensating for the predator's blind spots, while the predator is using its body to create a defensive perimeter." The Marines tried to circle around, but every time they moved, the unlikely pair shifted to maintain their protective positioning. The Shadow Stalker's chromatophores now displayed patterns none of the xenobiologists had seen before, complex spirals of deep blue and silver. Sir, the creature's biochemistry readings," one Marine reported to his captain. "It's not showing aggression markers toward the human. This is protective behavior." Captain Vorth activated his suit's external speakers. "Human, you will release that creature for containment, or we will use force." Alexander finally looked up, his eyes hard. "This creature has a name in its own language. It calls itself something that roughly translates to midnight. And midnight is not going anywhere with you. You can't possibly—" Alexander pulled a small device from his belt. "Emergency Medical Authorization Code 77 Alpha. I am claiming this creature as a patient under Concordant Medical Protocol 23, which grants me full authority over its treatment and recovery." The captain's implants flickered as he processed this. You can't bond with a predator." "I'm not bonding with it," Alexander said simply. "I'm treating it, and it trusts me now." What followed was a tense standoff that lasted nearly an hour. The Marines tried various approaches to separate human and predator, but the two had formed a defensive partnership that seemed almost telepathic in its efficiency. Every attempt at containment was countered not through violence, but through evasion and mutual protection. Finally, after consulting with his superiors, Captain Vorth received new orders. He approached again, this time without weapons raised. "Orders from Concordant Command," he announced. "Non-interference protocol is now in effect. You and your patient are free to continue your research." As the Marines withdrew, the three xenobiologists on the station were frantically updating their databases and filing preliminary reports. "We need to contact the Xenocultural Studies Division," Dr. Thorne said, her excitement barely contained. "This changes everything we know about apex predator behavior." More than that, Director Kuhl added, all four eyes focused on the screens below. "It changes everything we know about cross-species emotional bonding." On the planet's surface, Alexander was cleaning his medical equipment, while midnight, for that was indeed how he thought of the creature, now tested its healing limbs. The predator's coloration had settled into soft patterns of deep blue and amber colors that their instruments identified as contentment and trust. "Ready to go?" Alexander asked, shouldering his pack. In response, Midnight moved to position itself slightly ahead and to the left, a walking formation that would allow both of them maximum awareness of their surroundings. Over the following days, the xenobiologists tracked the pair as they moved through territories that should have been death traps for any single creature. But they weren't a single creature anymore. Alexander's medical knowledge and human inventiveness complemented Midnight's natural predatory abilities and intimate knowledge of the terrain. When scavenger packs approached, Midnight would guide them to defensive positions, while Alexander used his equipment to create diversions or deterrents. When they encountered environmental hazards, Alexander's technology combined with Midnight's natural adaptability to overcome obstacles neither could have handled alone. "They're not just companions," Professor Enva observed on the 7th day of tracking. "They're a symbiotic team. Each one makes the other more capable than they could ever be alone." The breakthrough moment came when they encountered another apex predator, a territorial thermodinoid that challenged Midnight's passage through its domain. The creature was larger than Midnight and uninjured. By all conventional wisdom, it should have been a one-sided fight. Instead, the xenobiologists watched in amazement as Alexander and Midnight worked together to resolve the conflict without violence. Alexander used his medical scanner to identify stress pheromones from the thermodinoid, while Midnight communicated through body language and chromatophore displays that the three researchers were beginning to understand. The territorial challenge dissolved into something resembling negotiation, with Alexander serving as an intermediary, whose presence somehow made peaceful resolution possible. "That's it," Dr. Thorne announced suddenly. "They're not just partners. Alexander has become a bridge species." "A what?" Director Kuhl asked. "A bridge species," she explained excitedly. "A transitional form that allows communication and cooperation between biological systems that normally couldn't interact. It's theoretical xenosociology, but we're watching it happen in real time." The implications rippled through concordant scientific institutions. Within days, emergency conferences were convened, new research parameters were established, and the textbooks on predator behavior were marked for major revision. Alexander and Midnight, unaware of the academic revolution they were creating, continued their journey across XJ272. They established a routine. Alexander would provide medical care and problem-solving, while Midnight offered protection and navigation through the dangerous terrain. But their relationship went deeper than mere practicality. In the evenings as they made camp, the xenobiologists observed behavioral patterns that defied easy categorization. Alexander would check and recheck Midnight's healing wounds, while Midnight would position itself to shield Alexander from the planet's cold winds. "The neurochemical readings are unprecedented," Dr. Thorne reported to Concordant Command during one of her regular briefings. "Both organisms show sustained elevation in compounds associated with pair bonding, but the specific chemical signatures don't match any known patterns. They're creating something entirely new." "Have they attempted to communicate linguistically?" asked Commander Resh Vala of Xenocultural Studies, attending the briefing via quantum relay. "Constantly," Professor Enva interjected. "Alexander talks to Midnight continuously, and while the predator obviously can't speak human languages, it's developed an increasingly sophisticated array of chromatophore patterns that appear to be responses to Alexander's words and emotional states. And the predator's behavior patterns." Director Kuhl manipulated his display to show behavioral analysis charts. "Completely altered. Midnight still demonstrates all the typical hunting and survival behaviors of a shadow stalker, but it's also showing protective, nurturing behaviors we've never recorded in this species. It's like the creature has developed a secondary behavioral matrix specifically for interacting with Alexander." Commander Vala was quiet for a moment. "Are you suggesting that this human has somehow domesticated an apex predator?" "No, sir," Dr. Thorne spoke firmly. "Domestication implies control and dependence. This is something else entirely. It's more like mutual evolution. Both organisms are adapting to create a new form of interspecies cooperation." The reports continued for weeks as Alexander and Midnight explored increasingly remote regions of XJ272. They encountered other predators, navigated treacherous terrain, and even survived a plasma storm that would have killed either of them alone. Through it all, the xenobiologists documented evidence of an unprecedented partnership. When Alexander was injured during a rock slide, Midnight carefully carried him to safety and stood guard while he used his medical equipment to treat his own wounds. When Midnight was exhausted after a territorial dispute with a pack of lesser predators, Alexander used his knowledge of xenobiology to prepare nutritional supplements that would help the creature recover faster. "They're not the same individuals they were when they first met," Professor Enva observed during week 6 of observation. "They've both changed, adapted, become something new together." It was Dr. Thorne who ultimately coined the term that would reshape xenobiological science: symbiotic cognitive enhancement. The theory suggested that certain species could form partnerships that enhanced not just survival capabilities, but actual intelligence and problem-solving capacity. "Traditional predator behavior is largely instinctual," she explained in her landmark paper. "But observe Midnight now. It demonstrates planning, hypothesis testing, even what appears to be abstract reasoning. Similarly, Alexander's survival capabilities on XJ-272 far exceed what any human should be able to achieve alone. Together, they've become something that's more than the sum of their parts. The academic community was initially skeptical, but the evidence was overwhelming. Video feeds showed Alexander and Midnight solving complex environmental puzzles, coordinating elaborate hunting strategies against dangerous prey, and even engaging in what could only be described as play. Play behavior in apex predators was considered impossible until now. Noted xenopsychologist Dr. Miranda Voss in her response to Thorne's paper. Play requires a level of cognitive flexibility and emotional security that predators supposedly can't achieve. Yet here we have documented evidence of a shadow stalker engaging in complex play behaviors with a human partner. The turning point in academic acceptance came during Week 8, when Alexander and Midnight encountered a group of injured lesser predators creatures that would normally be either prey or rivals for a shadow stalker. Instead of attacking or ignoring them, Midnight positioned itself defensively, while Alexander approached with his medical equipment. The xenobiologist watched in astonishment as Alexander treated the injured creatures, while Midnight kept watch, protecting both doctor and patients from other threats. "This is unprecedented," Director Kuhl reported to Concordat High Command. "We're witnessing the spontaneous emergence of xenomedical practice. Alexander is using his medical skills to treat multiple species, while Midnight is demonstrating protective behavior toward creatures it would normally consider prey. And the treated predators, they accept the treatment. More than that, they seem to recognize Midnight as something new. Not a threat, not prey, not a rival. Something outside their normal behavioral categories." High Command's response was swift and decisive. Within days, new protocols were issued throughout Concordat space. Humans, demonstrating the Novak effect, were to be given full research autonomy, and any attempted interference with human-predator partnerships would result in severe disciplinary action. The new protocols came just in time. As word of Alexander and Midnight's partnership spread, other humans began volunteering for similar missions. Not all were successful. The xenobiologists documented several failures, where humans attempted to force bonding with predators through inadequate medical intervention or incorrect behavioral approaches. But the successes were remarkable. A human botanist named Sarah Chen successfully partnered with a plant symbiotic predator on the jungle world of Verdania Prime. An engineer from Mars established a working relationship with a crystalline predator that had previously been considered essentially a geological hazard. "We're observing the emergence of a new human subspecialty," Professor Enva wrote in his contribution to the growing body of research. "Humans with specific psychological and physiological traits that make them capable of forming these unprecedented partnerships. They're becoming bridges between human space and the predatory ecosystems we've always seen as hostile." Meanwhile, Alexander and Midnight continued their exploration of XJ-272, now joined occasionally by other partnership teams who came to learn from their example. Alexander had begun developing standardized medical protocols for treating different predator species, while Midnight seemed to serve as a sort of ambassador, demonstrating to other predators that cooperation with humans was possible. The implications for exploration and colony expansion are staggering, noted Administrator Crex Tolleman in a classified report to the Concordat Colonial Ministry. Planets previously considered too dangerous for settlement because of apex predator populations might now be viable if we can establish sustainable partnerships with the local predatory ecosystems. But it was the social and philosophical implications that truly revolutionized Concordat society. The existence of the human-predator partnerships forced a fundamental reevaluation of humanity's role in the galaxy. "We've always seen ourselves as the species that tames environments," philosopher Dr. Elena Vasquez wrote in her influential essay, The Species That Bridges. But perhaps our true evolutionary advantage isn't dominance, it's connection. The ability to form partnerships with species so different from ourselves that such partnerships shouldn't theoretically be possible. Alexander and Midnight eventually returned to more populated space, but their impact continued to ripple outward. Training programs were established for potential bridge species candidates. New research institutions were founded to study interspecies cooperation. The Concordat Medical Corps developed entirely new specializations in xenological emergency medicine. On Epsilon 12 station, Dr. Thorne, Professor Enva, and Director Kuhl found themselves at the center of a new scientific revolution they had helped document from its very beginning. "Do you think they knew?" Dr. Thorne asked one day, as they watched live feeds of human predator teams working on a dozen different worlds. "Alexander and Midnight, I mean. Do you think they understood what they were starting?" Professor Enva manipulated his display to show the latest partnership updates. "I think they were just doing what felt right. Sometimes the most profound changes happen, not because someone sets out to change everything, but because they simply follow their instincts in a moment of crisis." "The Novak effect," Director Kuhl mused. "That's what they're calling it in the academic journals. Though I've heard some humans prefer the Midnight Protocol. Either way," Dr. Thorne smiled, "they've changed everything. Predator-human partnerships, new medical techniques, expanded theories of consciousness and cooperation. And they did it all by refusing to be afraid." 6 months after their first meeting, Alexander and Midnight had settled into a routine life of exploration and research. They traveled from world to world documenting predator species and developing new partnership protocols. Alexander had become something of a legend among xenobiologists, while Midnight had evolved into what some described as a super predator, retaining all its natural abilities while gaining new capacities for cooperation and complex reasoning. Their relationship had also sparked new questions about consciousness, intelligence, and what it means to be an individual. Bioethicists debated whether Midnight could be considered a person in the legal sense, while psychologists studied the cognitive changes both human and predator had undergone. They dreamed together, noted sleep researcher Dr. James Whitfield, whose studies of Alexander and Midnight had revealed that their sleep cycles had synchronized, and their brain states showed unprecedented patterns of neural resonance. Not metaphorically, but literally. Their neural activity during REM sleep shows patterns of synchronization we've never seen between different species. But perhaps the most significant change was in how humanity viewed its place in the universe. The predator partnerships had demonstrated that humans could be more than conquerors or stewards of alien worlds. They could be partners, bridges, facilitators of cooperation between species that had never before been able to coexist. As Alexander often said in his lectures to aspiring bridge species candidates, "We thought we were alone in our intelligence, alone in our capacity for complex thought and emotion. Midnight taught me that we were never alone. We just hadn't learned how to listen." The story of Alexander and Midnight became a cornerstone of Concordat culture taught in schools, referenced in diplomatic negotiations, and cited in military protocols. Their partnership had proven that with patience, understanding, and medical knowledge, even the most fundamental barriers between species could be overcome. On the anniversary of their first meeting, the Concordat Council officially designated XJ272 as a partnership heritage site, ensuring that the planet where everything began would be preserved as a reminder of what's possible when fear gives way to compassion. Alexander and Midnight returned to XJ272 for the dedication ceremony. As they stood together at the site where they had first met, watching as other human predator teams continued their own journeys of discovery, the xenobiologists on Epsilon 12 recorded one final observation. Subjects' neurochemical patterns indicate sustained contentment and fulfillment, Dr. Thorne noted in her log. Both human and predator appear to have found not just partnership, but something that might be called happiness. Professor Enva looked up from his displays. "I think what they've found is even more important than that. They've found proof that the universe is bigger, stranger, and more wonderful than we ever imagined. And that in that vast strangeness, no one has to be alone. The research continued, new partnerships formed, and the boundaries of what was considered possible continued to expand. But it all began with a moment of choice, when a human looked at a wounded predator and decided to help rather than harm. That choice had changed everything, and it would continue to change everything, one partnership at a time, one world at a time, until the whole galaxy was transformed by the understanding that the greatest strength comes not from the ability to conquer, but from the courage to connect. Alexander and Midnight had shown the way. Now it was up to others to follow the path. They had begun building bridges across the vast spaces between species, creating a future where partnership replaced predation, and where the phrase, "they saw a human heal an apex predator," became the beginning of countless stories of cooperation and hope throughout the stars.